Cannonsburg is a reconstructed pioneer village located in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Its purpose is to give visitors a genuine feel of day-to-day life in the rural South as colonists settled westward. There are 17 buildings and various other artifacts that have been donated and reconstructed on site, and the buildings range from the early 1800s to about 1920. In 1974, Cannonsburg Village was one of 16 American bicentennial projects that received federal aid. With a $75,000 government award and several grants, the project began. Dr. Bren Martin is the director of the Public History Department at neighboring Middle Tennessee State University and has worked closely with the site over the last several years to assist on improvements and future projects.
Cannonsburg was a bicentennial project. So in 1974, 1975, this was a project that was undertaken by local political leaders, especially Mayor Westbrook at the time. This was, as I understand, sort of his pet project. And so in celebration of the nation's bicentennial, they received some money from the federal government in order to interpret this. And so they began to move buildings from around Rutherford County, and as I understand it, really from throughout Middle Tennessee. Primarily log structures. There's an old schoolhouse and grist mill and so forth and so on that they moved onto the site in order to then open it to the public as a bicentennial celebration in 1976.
When the site originally opened, the city of Murfreesboro employed over 100 staff members. The site is still owned by the city of Murfreesboro and is maintained by the Department of Parks and Recreation. Beginning in the spring, the park opens to the public and can be visited through late fall. For 6 months, the park is staffed by many local residents who take great pride in demonstrating how things were done in days gone by. The working blacksmith shop demonstrates how early communities depended on this lost art for making horseshoes, wagon wheels, repairing tools, and many other duties that kept the village running smoothly in the 19th century. The grist mill also played an essential role in the day-to-day life of the early settlers. By grinding grains into flour, settlers were able to put food on the table. Original grindstones are used to demonstrate how corn or wheat would fall between them and dispense a fine, powdery flour or cornmeal. Cannonsburg Village also educates visitors on how even more modern technologies evolved. For instance, at the telephone exchange company, visitors can see firsthand how an early 1900s switchboard was operated. They also get a history of how the telephone was invented and how it developed over the years. Although the village is not an official historical site, it does do a nice job in giving visitors a general historical perspective of a frontier community, even though it is a very broad interpretation. Some can argue that it is more confusing to the public because such a vast period of time is displayed in a single setting. Although the village clearly dates and explains each of its exhibits, at times it can be interpreted as an artifact garden. The fact that you have a John Deere tractor 20 feet from an Abraham Lincoln impersonator confuses some visitors. Because there is no clear interpretation, the site may have the opposite effect that was intended for the public. Visitors may leave the site scratching their head and asking themselves if telephones really did exist in 1800.
Cannonsburg initially started out really primarily focusing on the interpretation of the pioneer, the early days of Middle Tennessee and Rutherford County history. In more recent years, like for instance, beginning in the 1980s, they went into a partnership with the Department of Agriculture here at MTSU in order to acquire tractors and other farming equipment. And I think that changed the nature of the site in many respects because it sort of pulled away from the pioneer feel of the village into more of a modern 20th century interpretation of agriculture. I think that they've also done a lot of other things in terms of community partnerships. They partner with the Lions Club, with the Art League, and other organizations in order to keep a sustained involvement there at the site.
Even more recently, the site has partnered with the Stones River Antique Auto Club of America. In 1978, members from the club approached Murfreesboro Mayor W.H. Westbrook about establishing a permanent clubhouse in Cannonsburg Village. In keeping with the theme of the village, a vintage service station building was agreed upon. The garage was constructed in 1979 and is a reproduction of what you would find in America in the 1920s. Although there are some very old automobiles that are consistent with the early 20th century, more recently, members have joined with cars that are questionably considered classics. In addition to the Antique Automobile Club, there are other organizations affiliated with the village, such as the Murfreesboro Lions Club, the Rutherford County Garden Club, the Murfreesboro Art League, and the Rutherford County Blacksmiths Association. The C.N. Haynes Museum is also a very big draw to the site. The Haynes Museum houses a broad array of early American artifacts that have either been donated or on loan from many residents in the Murfreesboro area. Some of the artifacts include an original flag from the American Revolution, as well as many artifacts from the American Civil War.
The Haynes Museum, the building in which it's located, used to be a cotton warehouse. In fact, that is the only building that is original to the site. That building was there before that they created Cannonsburg, and that's the site where they chose to put their museum in there. And the exhibit that's currently in there was one that was developed by the Center for Historic Preservation back in, I guess, the mid-1970s. And that same core exhibit has been there since the 1970s.
Not only does Cannonsburg reach out to local organizations, but it also reaches out to the general public as well through its annual Pioneer Days Festival and also the internationally recognized Uncle Dave's Macon Days Bluegrass Festival. It is recognized as the site for national championship competitions in banjo picking, old-time buck dancing, and old-time clog dancing. The 3-day festival brings in around 40,000 tourists to the Murfreesboro area and boosts the economy by $1 million.
I think that Cannonsburg has a great deal of potential to be the orientation site for heritage tourism in Rutherford County and Middle Tennessee. In their 5-year plan, in fact, that they do have a structure that will be on site that will be the Museum of Middle Tennessee History. And I do think that they have great material culture there. You know, the objects and the artifacts that they have there are very, very good. But currently they don't have the financial support, and so I think it's going to be a challenge to really fulfill that potential to become, the premier heritage tourism site of the area.
It is difficult to say where to draw the line at what can be associated with the village. That's the problem with having no defined era like most legitimate historical sites, although Cannonsburg does not claim to be a historical site. On a past Cannonsburg information flyer, it invites you to step back into time. It doesn't specify what time, and maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe the fact that it has continued to evolve with time and continued to reach out to the community to pull new groups in may have something to do with its success. After all, it is the only one of the bicentennial projects sponsored by the government that is still around today.
Cannonsburg has a lot of potential, and I think that with the new leadership, with more resources from the city of Murfreesboro now that it is a part of Parks and Recreation, it's my great hope that Cannonsburg can fulfill its potential.